It was just another morning. Until it wasn't. Henry Larch pushed open the door of Meadow Dairy. Cold air slipped inside. He struck a match. The oil lamp flickered, steady glow across the floorboards. For 30 years, this was his rhythm. No day began without milk. He checked the churns. Solid, secure, cream separators ready, tools lined neatly on the shelf. His hands moved with habit measured, careful. Henry was a man who did not rush. Outside, faint light touched the cobblestones. Ben Larch, 25, his son, already worked by the float. Quick hands, sandy hair. He ticked off names in the delivery ledger. He had painted Meadow Dairy on the float in clean blue letters. A small touch, but proud. "Morning, Dad," Ben called. "Mrs. Henderson wants an extra pint today. Sister visiting from London." Henry nodded. The boy noticed everything. Every change, every detail. Footsteps tapped against stone. May Reed entered, coat wrapped tight, breath clouding in the chill. She said little, always precise. She went straight to the testing table, ledger open, pencil sharp. A moment later, Len Ogborn stumbled in, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. Awkward, clumsy, but strong. He knew ropes and pulleys better than anyone. He kept the float alive. A mechanic's hands. Routine moved forward. Bottles clinked. Notes scribbled. Cream measured. Familiar sounds. The dairy was alive in its quiet way. Then came the sharp voice. Violet Tanner, owner of the Copper Kettle Tear Room. She appeared at the doorway, arms folded, eyes sharp. "Mr. Larch," she said, "I trust there won't be a repeat of yesterday's cream. My customers expect better." Henry's jaw tightened. Always demanding, always late with payment. Ben glanced up, ledger in hand, eyes narrowing. He had written notes about her returns, cream thinner than it should be, too thin. Before Henry could answer, another figure appeared. Sid Sykes, the grocer, too well dressed for dawn, smile too quick. He lingered, scanning crates as if searching for weakness. A rival, hungry for customers. The dairy bustled, but under the rhythm something shifted. Violet scowled. Sykes watched. Ben noted details in his book. The air carried more than the smell of milk. It carried tension, unseen, unspoken. And above them all, on the wooden ramp where churns waited to be rolled, something heavy rested, silent, waiting. The village was waking, but the dairy was already marked for death. None of them knew. By sunrise, blood and milk would spill together on the ramp. The sound came first. A crack, a crash, a cry. Henry Larch froze at the separator, his hands slick with cream, his ears ringing. That cry, he knew it. "Ben." "Ben?" Henry's voice broke. The noise had come from the ramp. Heavy churn, splintering wood. Silence after. Too much silence. May Reed stood still, pencil raised above the ledger. Her face pale, lips parted, but no sound left her. Len Ogborn dropped his coil of rope and stumbled forward, knees and elbows awkward. His boots scraped wood. He rushed toward the ramp. Henry followed, legs heavy, chest tight, fear in every step. And then he saw. Ben lay at the bottom of the loading ramp. His body twisted wrong, cap beside him. A churn toppled on its side, milk spreading white across dark boards. The whiteness looked wrong, too clean, too wide, like a sheet. Henry gasped, stumbling forward, but stopped short. The angle of Ben's head told the truth. Final. "Get Dr. Haydock," Henry whispered. His throat closed on the words. "And Inspector Slack." Len ran for the phone. Hands shook so hard it took him 2 tries to connect. The dairy that had been routine only minutes before now felt broken. Bottles clinked faintly in their crates, cruelly ordinary. Within minutes, heavy boots thudded. Voices filled the space. The doctor arrived first, coat over nightclothes, bag in hand. He knelt. Quick check. His voice flat. Blunt trauma, skull fracture, falling, object. Henry clutched the wall, breath shallow. His son, careful Ben, gone under a churn. Inspector Slack arrived next, breathed hard from his bicycle ride. He scanned the scene with narrowed eyes. Practical, impatient. Wet boards, Slack said. Slick. Boy slipped, hit the trestle, churn fell. Tragic accident. Nothing more. Henry tried to speak, to say Ben was never careless, that he checked every chalk, every wedge, every morning. But grief locked his voice. He could only watch Slack scribble notes. Case closed before it began. A soft step broke the silence. Miss Jane Marple entered. Small, unassuming. White hair neat. Eyes mild but sharp. She had come for her milk, as always. She looked at Ben. She looked at the churn. She looked at the ramp. And then she saw the patch on the boards. She bent down, touched it with one finger, lifted it to her nose. Her eyes narrowed. "How curious," she whispered. Miss Marple had found something. Something Inspector Slack had missed. It looked like spilled milk. But Miss Marple knew better. She crouched, touched the damp patch again, brought her finger close, smelled it, then tasted lightly. Just enough. Sweet. Her eyes lifted. Calm. Thoughtful. But inside, sharp. "Raw milk," she murmured, "is never sweet." Henry turned, startled. "What do you mean?" His voice cracked under grief. "Fresh milk," Marple said gently, "is neutral. At times, even bitter, but never sweet." Inspector Slack snorted. "With respect, madam, shock can muddle the senses. You taste what you expect." "No," she replied softly. "I taste sugar." The word hung heavy. "Sugar." Henry frowned, his face hollow. "Ben would never—" He stopped. His son was careful. Always. Marple's gaze slid to the wheel chocks. Wooden wedges that should hold the churn steady. One sat out of place, slightly back. Not where it belonged. "Mr. Larch?" she asked quietly. "Was Ben in the habit of checking the chocks?" Henry nodded at once. "Every morning. Regular as clockwork. He said better to spend a minute checking than regret forever. And last night? Set firm before we locked up." Henry's voice shook. Marple nodded. Her eyes lingered on the displaced wedge, on the faint glitter along the rail. She bent again, brushed her fingers. A fine, granular dust clung to her skin. She held it to the light. Pale crystals. Sugar again. Slack shifted, impatient. "Really, Miss Marple, we must be practical. A slip, a fall. That's the explanation." But Henry's face changed. Slack's words rang hollow now. Ben was careful. Ben was precise. Mayreed whispered from the ledger table. He always checked. Always. Silence followed. The hum of the separator. The faint drip from the churn. Ordinary sounds, suddenly sinister. Marple straightened. "Mr. Larch, your son did not slip. Something was altered here. This milk, this sweetness, these crystals, none of it belongs." Slack's eyes narrowed. "Accidents don't turn into crimes simply because we look at them from every angle." But Henry no longer believed him. His son's honesty, his habits, his notes he knew. Something was wrong. And Marple had seen it. Her blue eyes fixed on the churn, on the patch, on the wedge. She turned to Henry. "Your boy," she said quietly, "saw something, and someone silenced him for it. Ben had not died by chance. He had been murdered." The dairy felt colder now. Ben's cap still lay near the wheel stop. Milk spread pale across the boards. Inspector Slack wrote in his notebook, already moving toward the door. Miss Marple stayed behind, eyes searching. "Mr. Larch," she said softly, "your son kept records, did he not?" Henry blinked. "Yes, always. Numbers, orders, everything written down." "Where?" Henry moved with heavy steps to the shelf. A leather-bound ledger rested there. The book. Ben guarded. His pride. His proof. Hands trembling, Henry opened it. Pages neat, lines straight, figures precise. Marple leaned closer, her eyes sharp. Then Henry stopped, his breath caught. On the last page, Ben's careful script. "Cream to copper kettle, return thin." The words sat plain, clear, simple, but dangerous. Henry's face twisted. Then, that means tampered. Altered. May Reed shifted uneasily. She looked at the note, then away. Miss Marple tapped the entry. Your son noticed. He knew something was wrong. He recorded it. Slack dismissed it with a wave. A boy writing down nonsense. It proves nothing. Accidents happen. End of matter. But Henry's grief hardened into suspicion. Ben's words weren't nonsense. His son didn't lie. Marple spoke again. Quiet, but firm. Ben intended to act. He planned to question someone. Perhaps this very morning. Henry nodded slowly. He said yesterday he would speak to Violet Tanner about the returns. His voice cracked. Violet, the copper kettle's owner, always sharp, always demanding, always late with money. The air grew heavier. Her name carried weight now, not just a difficult customer, something more. May's pencil slipped from her fingers. It clattered on the table. She didn't bend to pick it up. Len rubbed the back of his neck. His awkward frame shifted nervously. He muttered. Ben was too sharp for his own good. Silence followed. Every eye turned to the ledger, to the single line, to the warning Ben had left without knowing. Marple closed the book gently, her hand steady. He wrote the truth, she said, and truth cost him. Henry clutched the ledger against his chest, his knuckles white. Slack snapped his notebook shut. Speculation, he said, but his tone had lost certainty. The ledger said otherwise. Ben had caught a fraud, and fraud had answered with death. It was Lady Bantry who saw it first. Her sharp eyes scanned the shelves above the ramp. She pointed suddenly. Jane, what's that? A bottle upside down in a clamp? Miss Marple looked up. A half-pint bottle, inverted, set strangely above the loading ramp. Henry frowned. That's not where bottles dry. We keep them near the sink. Not here. Marple stepped forward. Calm, careful. She reached up, lifted the bottle free. The clamp released it easily. She turned it in her hands. The foil cap looked smooth, neat, untouched. But her eyes narrowed. Something off. She pressed lightly along the rim, felt a second ridge beneath. Curious, she whispered. Lady Bantry leaned close. What is it? Marple peeled the first foil carefully. Beneath it another foil, perfectly sealed, but pierced. A neat pinhole in the center. 2 foils, 1 false, 1 real. Henry's breath caught. Why would anyone? To disguise a puncture, Marple said softly. The outer foil hides it. The inner foil allows a slow drip, a trickle, controlled. She tilted the bottle. A faint tide mark showed along the glass, as though liquid had crept down its side for hours. Lady Bantry shivered. So it was leaking? All night? Not leaking, Marple corrected. Dripping. On purpose. Positioned exactly above the ramp. Henry's face hardened. You mean someone set this up to time, to trigger? Marple nodded. A mechanism. A murder device. Milk falling, drop by drop, feeding something below. Inspector Slack stepped forward at last, his tone sharp. Miss Marple, really. Bottles dry in odd places, foils dent, holes appear. Nothing here proves crime. But his eyes betrayed unease. Marple ignored him. She held the bottle higher. The pinhole gleamed in the light. Deliberate. Exact. She spoke softly, but every word struck deep. Someone planned. Someone measured. Someone used this bottle as a clock. A drip clock. To kill. Silence filled the dairy. Bottles clinked faintly in their crates, mocking the stillness. Lady Bantry whispered. Then Ben's death wasn't chance. It was timed. Henry gripped, the ledger tighter, his knuckles white. His son had been lured into place by routine, by habit, by trust. Slack's pencil hovered, but no note came. Even he had no answer. The bottle was no longer innocent. It was murder, sealed beneath 2 foils. It was Miss Marple who suggested it. Dolly, would you help me lift that wheel stop? Lady Bantry blinked. The chalk? It's heavy. Yes, but I think we must look beneath. Henry stared. Beneath? Why? Marple's eyes stayed fixed on the wedge, because that's where the answer lies. The two women bent. Together, they heaved the block from its place. Wood scraped wood. The chalk lifted clear, and there beneath it lay 2 sugar cubes, partly dissolved, edges soft. Sticky residue clung to the timber. Blue paper fragments stuck in the grain. Henry gasped. Sugar! Marple touched the crumbling edges. Her fingertip came away wet. Tacky. Yes. Sugar. Positioned deliberately. Lady Bantry bent closer, and rapped, in blue, the sort Sykes sells. Marple nodded. Sugar cubes beneath a wedge, dissolving slowly as milk dripped from above. Henry's voice grew tight. So the chalk, the block holding the churn, rested on sugar? Exactly, Marple replied. As the cubes weakened, the wedge slipped. The churn rolled, timed to perfection. The room fell silent. Only the faint hum of the separator remained. Inspector Slack finally spoke, voice clipped. Coincidence. A prank. Children could have put cubes there. No, Marple said firmly. Children don't pierce foils. They don't rig bottles in clamps. They don't plan murders with sugar and milk. Henry's fists clenched. His son's habits careful, safe, precise, now used against him. Someone knew Ben would be here. Someone counted on it. May Reed's voice shook. Those wrappings, they're copper kettles kind. I've seen them on Tanner's tables. Her words hung heavy. Violet Tanner, again. Lady Bantry looked at Marple. So milk dripped, sugar weakened, wedge slipped, churn rolled, all by design. Marple's eyes stayed cold. Yes, an accident made to look natural, but it was a clock, a murder clock. Slack scowled, but his notebook remained open. No words written. Evidence too sharp now, too clear. Henry stared at the residue. At the sugar trail glistening faintly under the lamplight, his son's death replayed in his mind. Ben standing, careful as always, never knowing the trap set beneath him. The dairy no longer smelled of milk. It smelled of betrayal. Milk and sugar, the gentlest of things, had become weapons, and the killer had planned every drop. It was Miss Marple who noticed it, not the churns. Not the wedges, not the sugar. A bottle, set apart from the others on the testing table. She leaned closer. The cream line was wrong. Too thin, barely visible. Mr. Larch, she said gently, this bottle, does it look right to you? Henry bent. His eyes, trained by years, measured the separation. His face hardened. No, not right at all. Morning milk should show a thick cream line. This is weak. Lady Bantry frowned. What does that mean? Henry's voice was flat. It means the milk was watered down, Marple added softly. And if watered, its density drops. The lactometer would detect it, unless... She touched the rim where dried residue remained. Flakes clung to her finger, crystalline. She pressed them, then tasted. Sweet, unless sugar was added back. To fool the test, May Reed gasped. Her pencil slipped again. She bent quickly, but her hands shook. Henry's face grew pale. Our milk, tampered with. In my dairy? Marple nodded slowly. Yes, someone has been diluting it, then sweetening it to restore the proper weight. Inspector Slack scoffed, but weaker this time. Speculation. Milk goes off. Residue clings. Nothing criminal. But Henry wasn't listening. He stared at the bottle, as if it had betrayed him. His family's work poisoned by fraud. Lady Bantry whispered, So the copper kettle returns. The thin cream, Ben noted. This proves it. Marple's eyes flicked to May, and Ben noticed yesterday. He recorded it in his ledger. He meant to act. May lowered her head. Her lips moved, but no words came. Henry's voice rose, breaking. My boy died for this, because he caught someone cheating us. Slack shifted uneasily. His pen scratched half-hearted notes. Even he could not ignore the pattern building. Marple set the bottle back down. Calm, precise. Her voice low. Fraud hides in the smallest signs. A thin cream line, a sweet taste, a wrong figure in a ledger. Ben saw them, and for that, he was silenced. The dairy seemed to close in. Ordinary bottles, familiar crates, all now evidence. Henry clenched the ledger tighter. His son's handwriting burned in his hands. The milk itself had carried the secret, and now it carried the shadow of murder. It was Miss Marple who turned to May Read. The young clerk stood stiff at the testing table, hands pressed flat, eyes on the ledger, not on the people. "May, dear," Marple said softly, "you record the readings each morning, do you not?" May nodded quickly. "Yes, always." "Then tell me," Marple pressed gently, "have you noticed anything strange? With the milk? With the figures?" May's lips trembled. Her eyes flicked toward Henry, then dropped. I only write what I'm told." Henry stepped forward. "Told? By who?" Her voice cracked. "By Mrs. Tanner." The room froze. Lady Bantry gasped. "Violet Tanner?" May's hands twisted in her apron. "She came to me. Said some readings must be wrong. Said to adjust them. Just a little." Henry's face flushed. "You falsified my records." Tears filled May's eyes. "I didn't want to, but she said she'd pay me. I needed money for my mother's medicine. I thought it was harmless. Only numbers." Miss Marple's tone stayed calm. "And Ben?" May swallowed. "He noticed, asked questions. Said the cream returned from Copper Kettle was thin. He checked my ledger. He wasn't satisfied." Henry's voice shook. "He meant to speak to her today. He told me yesterday. He planned to confront Violet." Marple nodded. The pieces slid into place. So she had reason to fear him. If he exposed her, her business collapsed. Her reputation gone. Slack muttered, "Still, thin milk and scribbled figures don't prove murder." But no one looked at him now. Henry's grief turned to fury. "My boy died because he was honest. Because he caught her trick." May sobbed. "I never thought, never imagined." Marple's eyes softened. "You were used, child. Your small dishonesty covered her greater fraud. And when Ben came too close, she silenced him." The ledger on the shelf seemed heavier now, every line poisoned by deception. Lady Bantry shook her head slowly. "Jane, this isn't business anymore. This is blood." Miss Marple's gaze lingered on May. "Fraud breeds desperation, and desperation kills." Henry pressed his fist to the ledger. His son's last notes, his son's last fight. Violet Tanner was no longer just a difficult customer. She was the shadow behind Ben's death. The search turned to the crates. Miss Marple asked Henry quietly, "Show me the Copper Kettle returns." He led her to the corner. A wooden crate, stenciled with the name in black paint. Bottles inside. Empty. Their glass held faint traces of cream. Marple bent low. She wasn't looking at the bottles. She looked at the corners. Dust, lint, scraps collected there. Her fingers brushed one scrap. Small, crumpled, blue. She held it up. Paper. Sugar wrapping. Lady Bantry leaned in. "Blue paper. I know that kind. Sykes sells it. Copper Kettle uses it at every table." Henry's breath caught. "That's the same blue we saw under the wheel stop." Marple nodded. Calm. "Exact. Yes. A fragment here, in a crate marked Copper Kettle, that links her sugar to the dairy floor." Slack frowned. His pen hesitated. "Scraps blow anywhere. Paper clings. Not proof." But his voice lacked conviction. Henry's jaw tightened. Ben wrote it down. Thin cream. Copper Kettle. Now this. May Read whispered. She must have carried cubes here, while handling the returns. The thought chilled them. The crate, innocent in itself, now tied Violet Tanner to the very mechanism of death. Lady Bantry shook her head. Sugar for tea turned into sugar for murder. Marple studied the scrap again. Small, ordinary, yet deadly in context. Fraud always leaves a trace. Even the smallest piece tells its story. Henry stared at the bottles. His son had handled them only yesterday, recorded their state, noted the truth, and now one scrap confirmed it. The dairy no longer felt safe. Every crate, every bottle, every wrapper evidence of betrayal. Slack cleared his throat. "We'll preserve it. Send it for examination." But no one missed the unease in his face. Even Slack could see the net tightening. Marple placed the paper gently in Henry's palm. A fragment. But fragments build the picture. Ben saw the first pieces. We see more now. Henry closed his hand around it. His grief deepened, but so did his resolve. The copper kettle's name on the crate, the sugar scrap inside it, the fraud in the ledger, the sweetness in the milk, all pointed in one direction. The trail of sugar led straight to Violet Tanner, and it was leading closer to the truth of murder. Miss Marple moved outside. Behind the dairy, bins stood in a neat row. Ordinary waste, foils, wrappings, scraps. She lifted the lid, looked in, not rushed, patient. Her hands shifted papers, caps, bits of rubbish. Then she found it. A circle of foil, smooth, intact, but pierced. A tiny hole cut in its center. Clean, exact. She held it up. The light caught it. Henry leaned close, his breath sharp. "That's one of ours. Our caps. But that hole, not natural." Marple nodded. "A hat pin, perhaps, or a fine needle. Not torn, not crushed, pierced." Lady Bantry's voice was low. "So the double foil bottle. This is the inner seal." "Yes," Marple answered. "The punctured one, removed after use, thrown here to hide it." Slack stepped forward, his face stiff. "Plenty of foils in bins, some dent, some torn. You see what you want to see." But his words rang thin. The foil in Marple's hand gleamed with deliberate intent. She turned it. The edges were smooth, too smooth, handled carefully, placed carefully. Henry's face darkened. "Whoever did this knew the work. They handled our caps like one of us," Lady Bantry whispered. "So it wasn't chance. It was skill." Marple dropped the foil into an envelope Slack produced. Evidence hides in plain rubbish, but rubbish still speaks. Silence pressed in. The hum of the float outside, the faint clink of bottles as May shifted nervously inside. Henry's grief deepened into anger. "They killed my boy with milk, with sugar, with foils, everyday things twisted." Marple laid a hand on his arm. "Steady. Ben saw too much. His honesty cost him. But his notes, his habits, they guide us." Lady Bantry looked toward the ramp. "Every detail matches. The sugar, the drip, the wedge, the foil, it all points to her." Henry's eyes hardened. Violet Tanner. The name carried weight now. Fraud. Trickery. Murder. Slack closed his notebook slowly, his usual certainty gone. Even he could not explain away pierced foil. The dairy felt smaller, its tools of trade transformed into weapons. Every sound was sharp, unnatural. Marple glanced at the bin again, her eyes cold. One piece after another. The picture builds. The hand behind this grows clearer. The foil had spoken, and its voice accused Violet Tanner. It was Len Ogborn who brought it forward. A rag, stained dark, smelling faintly of grease. He shuffled, uneasy. "Found this by the clamp. Thought it odd." Henry frowned. "Clamp doesn't need grease. Not there." Marple reached for the rag, turned it in her hands. Sticky, black, fresh. She looked at the clamp fixed to the shelf above the ramp. She touched it lightly. Her fingers came away slick. "Greased deliberately," she said. Lady Bantry leaned in. "But why?" Marple explained simply. "So the bottle stayed fixed. So the drip mechanism held steady. Without grease, the clamp might have creaked or slipped. With grease, it remained silent." Henry's face hardened. "So someone prepared it. Careful, not hurried." "Yes," Marple nodded. "This wasn't a rash act. It was engineering. Murder measured with patience." Slack shifted uneasily. His voice clipped. "People grease tools all the time. Farmers, mechanics. It proves nothing." But his tone lacked force. Marple ignored him. Her eyes lingered on the clamp. "The rag shows knowledge. Whoever set this knew how to secure a bottle without drawing notice." Len's voice wavered. I keep rags near the separator. That one. It isn't mine. Henry's hand trembled as he touched the clamp himself. My Ben. He trusted this place. He never dreamed every detail around him was turned against him. Lady Bantry whispered, milk, sugar, foil, grease, all every day, all twisted. Marple folded the rag carefully. Each item speaks, alone, small, together, damning. Slack scribbled something at last, his usual confidence gone, his jaw tight. So you claim, but courts want more than sticky rags. Henry's grief sharpened into anger. Ben's death isn't an accident. Every sign proves it. The dairy creaked with silence. Even the bottle seemed to echo the tension. Marple's voice stayed calm. This rag is not proof by itself, but it is another stone in the wall, and that wall is closing in. Lady Bantry's eyes met hers. On Violet Tanner. Marple did not answer. She didn't need to. The rag, the clamp, the grease all pointed the same way. Henry clenched his fists. His son's honesty had been met with a plan as cold as iron. The clamp held more than a bottle. It held the proof of murder's careful hand. Inspector Slack called them one by one. Voices echoed in the dairy. Chairs scraped, the air heavy with unease. Where were you? He asked sharply. Between 4 and 5 this morning? Henry answered first. His voice steady, though grief strained every word. I was at the separator. Ben checked the ramp. I stayed inside. May saw me. May nodded faintly. Yes, he was at the machine. I noted the readings. Slack scribbled, turned to Len. And you? Len shifted in his seat. His hands fidgeted. I went to Sykes' shop. Rope snapped yesterday. Needed new line. Sid saw me. Slack jotted, his eyes narrowed. Marple listened. Calm, watching faces, not words. May read. Slack pressed. Your place? She swallowed. At the ledger. As always. Ben passed the book to me. Wrote his notes. I never left the table. Her voice trembled, but her answer held. Lady Bantry interjected. And Mrs. Tanner? Where was she? Slack cleared his throat. Reports say she was seen unlocking the copper kettle, earlier than usual, 4:30. Henry's head snapped up. Earlier? She never opens before 6. Marple's eyes narrowed. Unusual times often conceal unusual acts. Slack bristled. Careful, Miss Marple. Alibis are statements, not accusations. But the room had shifted. Henry's grief gave him clarity. Ben meant to confront her today. He said so, and suddenly she appears at her shop 2 hours before dawn. May's hands twisted in her lap. She told me once. Early hours are quiet, no one watching. Lady Bantry frowned, or no one watching her slip into the dairy. Slack scowled. His pencil scratched slower. Now, he had no quick dismissal. Marple spoke softly, each word precise. Fraud demands secrecy, and secrecy thrives in the dark. Mrs. Tanner's early arrival is not a habit. It is a signal. Henry's jaw set. She knew Ben was onto her. She came here. She set the trap. The silence stretched. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall filled it. Each tick felt like a nail driven deeper. Slack muttered. Alibis can be twisted, but one will break. Marple's gaze stayed on the ledger, on Ben's last line, on truth written in his hand. Every alibi was neat, too neat, and one of them was about to unravel. The clue came from a villager. Mrs. Pike, the baker's wife, arrived with flour still on her sleeves. She wrung her hands, nervous to speak before Inspector Slack. I thought it nothing, she began. But perhaps it matters. Marple's eyes softened. Please, Mrs. Pike, tell us. The woman nodded quickly. Just after sunrise, a boy came running, sent from the copper kettle. He wanted sugar. In a hurry. Henry frowned. Sugar? At that hour? Yes, Mrs. Pike said firmly. And not a little. A full bag of cubes, more than a tea room could need on one morning. Lady Bantry exchanged a glance with Marple. Strange timing. Marple's voice was calm. When supplies run short, it often points to recent use. More than usual, Perhaps cubes spent elsewhere. Henry's jaw tightened. His son's notes echoed in his mind. Thin cream. Wrong returns. Copper kettle. Slack tried to wave it off. Shops run out. Deliveries miscount. A boy sent for sugar is not evidence of murder. But Mrs. Pike stood firm. I've sold to Violet Tanner for years. Never once did she send a boy so early. Not until this morning. The room grew tense. The dairy smelled of milk, but suspicion now coated every breath. May whispered. She must have used them. For the wedge. For the ramp. She replaced what she lost. Henry's fists clenched. So she rigs sugar under the chock, then runs short, then sends a boy racing to cover her tracks. Slack scribbled reluctantly, his voice tight. Circumstance. Nothing more. But even he avoided Marple's steady gaze. She folded her hands, her tone gentle, but each word struck deep. Fraud is greedy. Greed never calculates enough. There is always a shortage, always a slip. Mrs. Tanner's haste betrays her. Lady Bantry whispered. So the sugar beneath the wheel, stop, the wrapper in the crate, the urgent purchase. All threads of one cloth. Henry's grief deepened into fury. My boy saw it. He knew. She killed him before he could speak. The room held silence, a heavy silence, the truth pressing down. Marple closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, calm as ever. Evidence is a puzzle, and the pieces are nearly joined. The copper kettle's owner was no longer merely suspect. She was caught in the sugars trail. The next piece was found in the storeroom. Henry unlocked the cabinet where tools were kept. He frowned. Something was missing. Something small, but important. The recapper, he said slowly. The hand press we use to seal foil caps. It isn't here. Marple's eyes sharpened. When was it last used? Yesterday morning, Henry replied. Ben set it back himself, he always did. Len shuffled awkwardly. Could have been borrowed. Sometimes neighbors ask for tools. Lady Bantry looked doubtful. But who would need a dairy recapper? Only someone working with bottles. Henry's jaw tightened. Someone who wanted to reseal after tampering. The air grew heavy. Slack scratched his head, uneasy. And who precisely could borrow it without record? Henry hesitated, his voice low. Violet Tanner. She's done it before. For her tea-room bottles. She asked Ben for the tool last week. A silence followed. Thick. Marple nodded once. Calm. That would allow her to pierce a foil, drain or drip milk, then press a fresh cover on top. Double seals. One false, one true. Henry's grief deepened. Ben would have noticed. He always checked the press after lending it. Lady Bantry whispered. So she had the means. Not just motive, the means. Slack's pen hovered. You have no proof she used it for murder. Only your suspicions. But even he could not deny the link. Henry's voice hardened. My boy is dead. Sugar cubes under a chock. Foils in the rubbish. A bottle dripping all night. And now the recapper gone. It all points to her. Marple's eyes stayed fixed on the empty slot in the cabinet, her tone soft but final. Murder requires three things: motive, means, and opportunity. Mrs. Tanner grows heavier in all three. Len shifted nervously. If she used it, she returned it after. Quietly. Yes, Marple said. And Ben saw something. A scratch, a mark, a foil too neat. He knew. Slack muttered. Speculation again. Courts want hard proof. But his voice faltered. He scribbled anyway. Henry closed the cabinet sharply. The hollow sound echoed through the dairy. His son had trusted order, but order was broken. The missing recapper was no longer a tool. It was the key that sealed murder itself. It was Miss Marple who asked for the floor to be cleared. Let us see, she said softly, what Ben saw, and how his death was arranged. The churn was lifted back onto the ramp, the wedge replaced beneath the wheel, the clamp tightened to hold a bottle overhead. Henry's hands shook as he obeyed her directions. But he did it. For Ben, Marple picked up the punctured foil, slipped it back onto a bottle, tilted it into the clamp. "Now," she said. "We wait." A faint drip began, drop by drop, falling onto the wedge below. Lady Bantry bent close. "It hits the sugar." "Yes," Marple said, slowly softening, weakening the cubes. "The wedge will hold. Until it doesn't." The room was silent, but for the steady rhythm of water drops, each one felt louder than the last. Henry's eyes burned. "That's what she did. She turned milk into a weapon." Marple nodded, calm, precise. A clock. A device set to trigger when no one watched. Ben checked the ramp as always. The wedge slid. The churn rolled. Len muttered, "Time to look like accident. Perfect accident." "Yes," Marple said softly, "but accidents do not leave sugar under wood. They do not hide pierced foils. They do not send boys for more cubes at dawn." Slack stood rigid, watching the wedge shift. The churn trembled against the ramp. For once, he said nothing. Lady Bantry whispered, "So it could kill at any moment, without a hand nearby." "Exactly," Marple answered. "The hand prepared it earlier. Then left." The bottle dripped. The sugar weakened. The wedge slipped. And death came on schedule. The wedge gave a tiny crack. The churn jerked forward. Henry caught it before it rolled, his arms straining, his face pale. Everyone stared. Proof had spoken. Henry's voice broke. "My boy never had a chance. She built a trap for him." Marple lowered her eyes. Yes, his honesty met her cunning, and the cunning was ruthless. Slack finally spoke, low, uneasy. "It's ingenious. Too ingenious for chance." Marple's gaze sharpened. "Fraud breeds invention. Murder demands it." Henry clutched the ledger, his knuckles white. His son's words had predicted this moment. The trap had been rebuilt, and no one could deny now it was murder, timed to the drip of milk. Inspector Slack slammed his notebook shut. "That demonstration proves nothing," he barked. "Mechanics. Tricks. You made it happen because you wanted it to." Henry's voice rose. "Wanted it? My son is dead. You saw it yourself. The wedge slipped when the sugar gave way." Slack scowled. "Coincidence. Wood warps. Moisture weakens. Bottles leak without malice. You can't hang a woman on spilled milk. And sugar cubes." Lady Bantry leaned forward sharply. "And yet every clue points to Violet Tanner. The returns, the sugar, the foils, the missing tool." Slack snapped. "Gossip and guesswork. That's all this village thrives on." But his eyes betrayed unease. Marple stayed calm, her tone soft, but her words cut. "Not gossip. Patterns. Fraud leaves traces. Murder leaves more." She gestured at the clamp, the bottle, the wedge. This was built, not chance. Ben discovered it. That discovery cost him. Henry's grief trembled into fury. "You dismiss him even in death?" He was careful, honest. He wrote the truth in his ledger. "You ignore it." Slack's jaw tightened. "I follow evidence, not fancies." Marple's gaze sharpened, then follow it. Sugar beneath a wedge, foil pierced, concealed, discarded. A boy sent for replacements at dawn. A tier room owner borrowing the one tool that makes double seals possible. Is that fancy, Inspector? Or is it fact? The dairy was silent. Only the clock ticked, each sound louder in the stillness. Lady Bantry whispered, "You cannot close your eyes forever, Slack." May Reed's voice cracked. "She told me to falsify figures. I swear it. She made me change the readings." Slack rubbed his forehead, his stubbornness strained against the weight pressing in. Finally he muttered, "So what? A dishonest shopkeeper. That doesn't make her a killer." Henry stepped forward, his face pale, his voice cold. "She killed my son because he was honest." "You call that nothing?" Marple looked at Slack. Her voice stayed quiet. "Certain. Every small thing builds the truth. You resist because you fear being wrong. But truth doesn't care for pride." Slack's pen trembled in his hand. He did not write. He only stood. The inspector's doubts cracked, but the truth pressed harder, and soon it would break through. They brought Violet Tanner into the dairy. She walked in briskly, chin high, eyes cold. Her apron, spotless. Her voice sharp. "What's all this fuss? I hear my name tossed about like mud. I won't have it." Henry's hands clenched. "You cheated us. You killed my boy." Tanner scoffed. "Nonsense." He slipped. "Everyone says so." Slack cleared his throat. "Mrs. Tanner, questions must be asked. About your returns. About your sugar." Her eyes narrowed. "Returns are my business. I pay for what I receive." Marple stepped forward. Calm, gentle, but steady as iron. "And yet the cream you returned was thin. Ben wrote it in his ledger, his last entry." Tanner's mouth tightened. Lady Bantry added, "And sugar wrappers your wrappers found beneath the chalk." Tanner's tone grew sharper. "Paper blows anywhere." Henry's voice broke. "And the boy you sent for more sugar? At dawn? The very morning Ben died?" For the first time Tanner hesitated. Only a flicker. But enough. Marple's eyes did not leave her. "You borrowed the recapper, to reseal foils, to disguise your tampering. And here we found a pierced inner cap, thrown in the rubbish." Tanner's face flushed. "Speculation. You have no proof." May Reed stood trembling. "She made me change figures, told me to write false readings, said no one would know." All eyes turned. May's words hung heavy. Tanner snapped. "The girl lies. She's weak, easily swayed." Marple's voice cut through, soft but unyielding. "Weakness bends, but truth holds. The evidence holds." Henry stepped closer, his grief burning. "Ben saw through you. That's why he died. He stood for honesty. You stood for greed." Tanner's mask slipped. Anger flashed in her eyes. Her lips pulled tight. For a heartbeat, silence pressed like stone. Then she forced a laugh. Stories, old women's tales. None of it would stand in court. Slack shifted uncomfortably. His pen scratched without conviction. Marple's gaze stayed fixed, calm, relentless. "We are not telling stories. We are laying pieces of a puzzle. And every piece points to you." Tanner's hand twitched against her apron. Her voice, when it came, was brittle. "You have nothing." But her eyes said otherwise. Her mask had cracked, and beneath it, anger and fear were rising fast. Miss Marple spoke first. Her voice was soft, but every word struck sharp. This was never only about milk. It was about fraud. Small at first, but it grew. Henry's face was hard. "Explain it. Let us hear what killed my boy." Marple folded her hands. Mrs. Tanner watered her milk. Each pint stretched further. But watered milk grows thin. The cream line betrays it. A lactometer test exposes it. Unless— She paused, eyes steady on Violet. "Unless sugar is added. Sugar restores the density. The needle rises. The fraud hides." Lady Bantry whispered. "So every return from the copper kettle was false. Thinner than it should be." Marple nodded. "Ben saw it. He wrote it down. He asked questions. That made him dangerous." Violet Tanner laughed bitterly. "Petty suspicions. Nothing more." Marple ignored her. "But fraud never stays small. Each false pint builds profit. Each lie tempts the hand to greater risk. And when discovery comes—" Her eyes turned to Henry. "Murder follows." Henry gripped the ledger. "So she used our honesty to line her pockets. My son found her out." She silenced him before he could speak. May Reed's voice broke. "She told me no harm was done, just numbers, just a little milk." I believed her. Marple's voice sharpened. "Ben did not. He knew lives rest on trust. A village drinks what a dairy provides. Dilute it, deceive it, and you poison trust itself." Slack shifted uncomfortably. "Fraud, yes. But murder—" Marple turned to him. "The fraud explains the murder. Ben was the obstacle. He had proof. He was ready to act. She could not afford exposure. So she planned. Patient, cold. Sugar beneath a chalk. A bottle dripping drop by. Drop. A churn rolling at the moment he bent to his work. Silence pressed close. Every face turned to Violet. Lady Bantry whispered, "Milk and sugar, comfort to us all," turned into tools of greed, tools of death. Henry's grief hardened into resolve. My boy died for honesty, and she killed him for lies. Violet's lips curled. Stories again. No jury would listen. Marple's eyes stayed steady. Perhaps. But truth listens, and it grows stronger with every piece. The fraud was no longer hidden, and with it, the motive for murder stood clear. The room closed in around Violet Tanner. Her arms stayed folded, but her eyes darted. Her confidence cracked. Inspector Slack's voice was low now, less certain. "You claim innocence, but the evidence piles." Henry stepped forward. "My boy wrote your name. Copper kettle. Thin cream. That ledger damns you." Violet snapped back. "He wrote suspicions. Suspicions are not facts." Lady Bantry cut in. "And the sugar? Your wrappers beneath the wedge? Your boy sent racing at dawn for more?" Violet's face flushed. "Coincidences, nothing more." Marple's tone remained calm. "And the recapper you borrowed? The pierced foil we found in the bin? Each coincidence builds a chain, and the chain grows tight." Mead trembled. "You told me to falsify readings. You said no one would know." Violet rounded on her. "You weak little fool." She stopped. Too late. Slack's pencil stilled. His jaw hardened. "Enough. You've denied. You've deflected. But every witness here speaks against you." Henry's voice broke. "She killed Ben because he was honest. Because he stood in her way." Silence followed. Marple stepped closer. Small. Calm. But her words cut like glass. "Fraud gave you profit, but fear drove you to murder. You set the trap. Drop by drop, sugar cube by sugar cube, you timed his death like a clock." Violet's lips parted. No words came. Only breath. Shallow. Fast. Slack stared at her. "Your alibi crumbles. Witnesses place you near the dairy. Your tools match the act. Your fraud is exposed." Lady Bantry whispered, "She has no way out." Henry clutched the ledger to his chest. His grief was fire now. His son's words were proof, and proof had teeth. Marple's eyes stayed fixed on Violet. "You killed, not with rage, but with planning. That is worse. Cold, calculated, cruel." Violet's hand shook. For the first time, her mask slipped fully. She spat the words. "You think you can prove it? You think gossip will hang me?" Slack leaned forward, his voice iron. "It isn't gossip anymore. It's evidence. Enough to bring you in." The net had drawn tight. Every strand held. The copper kettle's owner was no longer only accused. She was cornered and ready to break. The dairy was quiet again. The churns stood still. The ramp swept clean. The foils, the wrappers, the rags all taken as evidence. Violet Tanner was gone, led away under Slack's order. Her protests had faded into the street. Only silence remained. Henry sat at the table. The ledger clutched tight, his eyes hollow, his voice low. He was honest. That's what killed him. Honesty. Lady Bantry placed a hand on his arm. And honesty uncovered her too, remember that. Mead stood nearby, pale. "If I had refused her, if I had told sooner." Marple's voice was gentle. "Do not carry her guilt. You were pressured. You were weak. But you did not kill." She did. Henry looked up, grief hard as stone. "My boy saw what others ignored, and they silenced him." Marple nodded slowly. "Yes, but truth does not stay buried." Ben's notes, his habits, his care, they carried his voice beyond death. They brought us here. Slack lingered at the doorway, his shoulders heavy, his pride broken. "You were right, Miss Marple. Every detail mattered. I didn't want to see it." Marple's eyes softened. Pride, blinds, but truth waits. Always. Outside the village stirred. Carts rolled, doors opened. Life went on. Yet a shadow lingered over every doorstep. Milk and sugar, once comfort, now whispered of betrayal. Lady Bantry sighed. It makes one wonder. How many ordinary things hide danger? A cube of sugar, a bottle of milk, a foil cap. Marple's gaze drifted to the ramp. Her voice soft, steady. Evil rarely comes with thunder. It comes quietly, in everyday acts, in hands trusted, in things we never question. Henry closed the ledger at last. His fingers lingered on Ben's final entry. Thin cream, copper kettle. He wrote the truth. He died for it. Marple placed her hand gently on the book. And because he wrote it, the truth lived. That is his legacy. The clock in the dairy ticked on, steady, relentless. The case was over, but the village would remember. Milk and sugar, the gentlest of comforts, had been twisted into tools of murder. Yet in the end, it was truth, patient and quiet, that proved stronger.